Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 16 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Now, I hope the weather is as good where you are as it is right here. Right now, the temperature is probably around about 30 degrees in the studio. And if I look as though I've just stepped out of the shower, that's because I have. Hot-tailing it down the M1, the M42 and the M5, leaving Hull, or Crawberry Hill to be precise, at around about 1 o'clock and pulling into Plymouth around about 6:45. Perfect timing. So I hope this weather continues, and I should be back at Crawberry Hill, certainly on Wednesday. And if you want to get an update on activities at Crawberry Hill and elsewhere in the UK with regards to the fracking agenda, then join me at 9 o'clock this evening for Fracking Nightmare. Or, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also find Fracking Nightmare on YouTube. And you can go to the whole playlist at www.frackingnightmare.com. Now, as regular viewers and AV5 attendees will, of course, recall, I've had some interesting drama over the last 5 weeks following the arrest and subsequent sectioning of Greg Nikolettos. Well, originally, Greg was very keen to give his presentation before leaving the UK, having put so much effort into it, then having come to the UK and endured the experience that he has in the ensuing 5 weeks. And we had arranged to host an event in London called Fracked, Tracked and Hacked, and that was due to have taken place yesterday. But after Greg was released from the section, following the police decision to drop all charges against him, and Greg left the hospital, but it became quickly apparent that the critical element here was getting Greg back home. So Greg left the UK last Sunday, arriving back in Brisbane in Australia. I think it was Tuesday, or certainly very early on Wednesday morning. And I'm pleased to report that he's doing well, recovering well at home, and hopefully will join us on a future edition of Fracking Nightmare. You will also recall that there is some unexplained time in Greg's timeline of his travel. Some 60 hours seems to have been lost following his meeting with a mysterious traveller at Dubai airport. Well, Greg's material, or much of his material, is right out there, available for all to view. Greg, in my opinion, is one of the foremost researchers on the planet into the microchipping and transhumanist agenda. And I want to show a short video. It's an animation that was produced by Greg, parodying the agenda. And Greg, interestingly, had a significant impact on the stock market because, coincidentally, although there may have been some other factors involved, but $100 million was wiped off the stock market value of the companies who were directly involved in the very chip agenda. So let's take a look at this short animation.
I'm spying on you. Oh, hello. My name is Scott Silverman. I'm the CEO of Positive ID. We're the makers of the Very Chip. It's a microchip that's injected into people in order to track help them. Some conspiracy theorists are accusing us of invading privacy or spying or even causing cancer. Ha ha ha! None of that is true. In fact, the name of our company used to be called Very Chip. Now it's called Positive ID. Get it? We're positive. Helping you by shoving a weird electronic device into your body. Get it? So let me explain what it is we do here. Maybe you've adopted a dog, a cat, or a monkey recently. Well, the shelter probably already injected a microchip into your pet in order to track it if it gets lost. Allow me to demonstrate with Mr. Tinkles, the monkey that lives in my pants. Well, howdy, Mr. Tinkles. It's time for your microchip. Now hold still. I'm just f***ing with you, Mr. Tinkles. Back into my pants with you. Now, if you and your family are injected with our microchip, your doctor will be able to scan your medical records from the chip in your body. You know, in case the doctor is totally incompetent and can't get copies the regular way. Because doctors are stupid. Speaking of which, some people say our microchips cause cancer. Well, that's just crazy talk. So it caused cancer in some lab animals. How do we know that cancer isn't just a wild conspiracy theory? Do you seriously know anyone who gets cancer anymore? If so, then they're f***ing liars! Besides, if people get cancer from the chip, then we'll develop a new chip that kills the cancer. And if the cancer-killing chip causes cancer, then, I don't know, whatever. Amputations, maybe. Anyway, Positive ID is at the vanguard of human microchipping technology. But some people are worried that, say, for example, a random government would come along and ask us to make a chip that could track the movements of people. Evil, twisted people who are probably up to something anyway. Well, I'm here to tell you that Positive ID would never do that. We're not in the business of invading privacy, not Positive ID. Nope. I would probably just form a sister company with my friends at IBM and Raytheon called, say, Sunshine Bubble Chocolate Corp. See what I did there? Gave an awesomely wicked thing a fuzzy, cuddly name. Anyway, Sunshine Bubbles Chocolate Corp would make the chips, not Positive ID, so stop calling me a liar. No. Keep talking. Keep writing crazy things about us. Our lawyers won't bother you in your underground bunkers. Just don't fall asleep, you tinfoil hat grassy knoll balls. Don't get sick. Don't pass out at a party. Don't get arrested or travel to any place that requires inoculations, because Sunshine Bubble Chocolate Corp will be there with our gigantic syringes. And then we'll have your cancerous nuts in our pockets, right next to wads of limitless government cash. That's right. Positive ID is here to help technology help you. Isn't that right, Mr. Tinkles?
Very few people understand the full extent and the magnitude of what is being perpetrated upon humanity here. And even those who perhaps have some idea when they talk about the cashless society really do not comprehend just how much freedom is going to be removed with the forthcoming Internet of Things. And I want to show you this quote from IBM Chief Executive Sam Palmisano. We can bring this up on the screen. And he said, indeed, almost anything, any person, any object, any process, or any service for any organization, large or small, can become digitally aware and networked. Now, we've been talking over the past few weeks with Pippa King, and Pippa is going to be joining us again this evening. And we've also had Steve Hernandez from San Antonio. And of course, Steve Hernandez is the father of Antonio Hernandez, who was expelled from her school for refusing to wear an active ID chip. I think we can remove that from the screen now. Thank you. So we're going to be progressing this because this is so critical that we're going to be progressing this discussion over the next coming weeks. And following on from Pippa, we're going to be talking with a lady who Pippa actually introduced me to, and I'm going to keep her name under wraps for the moment. But this lady has been pursuing and researching this Internet of Things and such things as ID providers. And we're going to be looking at how we are all sleepwalking into third-party ID providers. And whilst that may sound benign, I can assure you it is anything but. But before I do introduce you to Pippa, or reintroduce you for those who have watched the previous discussions with Pippa, I just want to mention the AV5 DVDs. The AV5 event, certainly the reviews that I've seen, everyone seemed to have had not only an extremely enjoyable time, but also extremely informative time. And our video team have been working to produce these DVDs over the last month. They will actually be available within the next 10 days. But we've had a benefactor step forward who has offered to pay £20 towards the cost of the first 100 AV5 box sets that are sold. So as we speak, my webmaster, John, he should have made the appropriate adjustments, and these box sets are currently available to the first 100 purchasers at $59.99. And those people who have already pre-ordered will indeed be receiving a £20 rebate. So that's the first 100 box sets that are sold, $59.99. So if you're interested, get out there, get onto the web. It's www.alternativeview.co.uk. Right, Pippa, are you there with us?
Hello, good evening again.
Good evening. You're becoming, well, a wonderful regular contributor to Humanity versus Insanity. And the purpose being, of course, is that we had Mike Mitchum on the show, on a couple of early editions of the show, talking about smart meters and the impact of Wi-Fi. But you have been obviously at the forefront of delaying, at the very least, in fact, preventing, perhaps, I'd like to say, the introduction of RFID in schools. Biometrics, it seems, is quite well advanced, and the schools are slipping the biometrics agenda in, although they shouldn't be, but in many cases under the radar. But the RFID agenda in schools is currently on hold. But we know that these socio-psychopathic global corporatists are not going to give up. They have a multi-generational agenda, and they will pick their moment. And if they push too far and they get a reaction, i.e. no social contract, no social license, then they take a pace back. But, you know, you're fortunately ahead of the curve. And, you know, these programs that we're putting out, Pippa, they're going to have, hopefully, the benefit of actually alerting people to what's coming, and then more people can get involved. But in the worst case scenario, tragically, it will be a record of the fact that there were people who had the foresight to see what was coming and were trying to warn people. And hopefully it doesn't come to that, because if people are watching it historically on that basis, then it will, of course, have been too late.
Indeed. It's not a very pleasant way to spend an awful lot of my time. It can get quite depressing. But I really appreciate having this outlet to sort of let people know, other than just my blog or tweeting or Facebook. So I do appreciate that. Thanks. I just wanted to go back to Andrea Hernandez's case in San Antonio. Radio frequency identification is RFID, and it can come in the form of, I think we mentioned like in the last episode, active frequency, where the tag is transmitting a radio frequency, or a passive, so it's actually asleep, and then a frequency as you approach a reader will wake the tag up, exchange information, and go back to sleep as you move away. Now, the RFID in San Antonio was an active RFID that the children were wearing. It was frequencing at 433.92 megahertz. And the children were told in the school that they couldn't be tracked anywhere outside school. But even though the tag was on 24/7, it don't worry about it, because you can't get tracked. So I have a blog, which is rfidinschools.com, and I started writing about Andrea's case along with West Cheshire College. And I had an email from a gentleman in the United States saying that he was ex-government, and he told me that the chipping agenda happening in San Antonio was intended for the government to take it to every single citizen. In actual fact, the 433 chips could be traced outside school. So I sort of sat on this email for a little bit, and then came to it one rainy April afternoon and did some research, and I found out that actually potentially he was true. What he was saying was true, because the United States government have been using 433 megahertz to track their assets around the world in what they call an in-transit visibility network. So all around ports and seaports and railway stations, major areas where transport is coming in and out of the country and around the country, you will find 433 receivers and antenna to read the 433 RFID chips that are in the tanks.
So it's like a global inventory control system.
Yes, it happened after the first Iraq war. The US lost a lot of its assets; they couldn't track them properly, and this is a result of what their poor stock keeping, I think, from the first Iraq war. So, in 2004, a company called Savvy, owned by Lockheed Martin, supplied the US military with this technology. and was the sole supplier of it. In actual fact, the same technology, which is ISO 18000-7, is a free license software. So now anybody can use it, but they have to adhere to this ISO standard, which Savvy sort of pioneered back sort of 10 years ago. So in actual fact, the children could be tracked outside school because it was wearing the same technology, the exact same specified technology that the US Department of Defense were using. The US Department of Defense are in 150 countries around the world, and the same RFID is supplied to NATO, which is in 28 countries. So this is a global network of receivers. So potentially anybody that was wearing, any child that is still wearing, as they still do in the United States, 433 megahertz active chip, can potentially be picked up on the defence network or NATO's network of this in-transit visibility network. So, sorry, Ian, you're going to say something?
Well, Pippa, whilst you've been talking, I just actually punched into Google 433 megahertz global inventory control, and it is staggering, all the providers that are out there. But this one caught my eye. It's a PDF document, and I can absolutely guarantee you that I'm going to read it. It seems that it was uploaded barely a month ago, and it says full spectrum tracking device provider. And the synopsis is management, logistic management and security control, etc. Fleets, warehouse inventory control, emergency vehicles, etc., etc., etc. Active player in the provision of superior mobile data terminal, MDT. And of course this all links in with you know, global positioning. So in other words, this is the infrastructure that is effectively in place for the Internet of Things, isn't it?
It is, and in the ISO standard, it is readied for the Internet of Things. It's 433 is one of the frequencies that will be used, but also as well, it can be an active and passive RFID, and it has the potential to be read for up to 10 kilometres, though it's normal for it to be in between 500 metres to a kilometre. But it has a good range, and the reason why they use 433 is because it can penetrate through water, concrete. It has a very good penetration frequency. I don't know, I'm not technical enough to know why other frequencies aren't, but that seems to have a good penetration through an awful lot of objects. So it's you're more visible carrying that RFID. So, but the thing with 433, and I can completely understand why industries want to standardise things so that it becomes a smooth running affair. You know, a Savvy eventually in 2009, there was a $429 million contract that went out from the Department of Defence, and Savvy and a number of other companies now supply them with still this standard. So it's even more embedded since 2004. There's an awful lot of money gone into this. But the point with 433 is, it can also read other frequencies. So if anybody's got a credit card or a debit card with a little sort of like echo symbol on it, which means you've got a passive RFID chip in there, that RFID chip will work at 13.56 megahertz, which is significantly lower than 433. But if you times 13.56 by 32, you get 433.92, which is the frequency that this system is at. So potentially there's the ability for NATO and the in-transit visibility network to wake up your card and read the data on it.
And potentially, if so deciding, the IRS or the Inland Revenue or whatever the tax authority in your country is called, if they decide that you owe them money. I mean, we're in the UK, the government is already putting forward the proposition that the tax authorities should be able to access your accounts and debit your account if you are in any tax arrears, or even if you're not in any tax arrears, but they think you are. So this means that literally the state, the corporatist state, could literally decide to debit your account for whatever it deems appropriate.
The potential is there. The network's on the ground. It's not being used for that at the moment, but it certainly could be, because the frequencies are all harmonically compatible, and also in the ISO standard, that's sort of laid down that it is standardised with other frequencies as well. So potentially, yes, it could have access. If you want to, the first slide that I sent you, have you got the slides there?
I have. Here we go. This is the 433 megahertz military systems compatible with tracking student locator RFID.
Yeah, that's on my website. It's only 3 pages long. It's not too hefty.
So which website is that, Pippa?
That's on... It's the RFIDinschools.com.
RFIDinschools.com, okay.
So the next time, if you want to put the next slide up, this frequency is already being used to track humans outside schools in the United States. It's the baby tag one, and one after that. That's the last one, I think. That's it. Oop.
Yeah, that one, sorry.
So that's the one, yeah. So these are baby tags, and these are active RFID tags that are put around babies' ankles when they're newborns, when they're first born. So apart from all the health issues, which other people can speak about far more than me, this baby would be transmitting a radio frequency of 433 megahertz to devices in the hospital to see when it goes out of range, where it should do, to make sure that the tagged mother is the acceptable person to be picking this baby up. So it's already being used in society for safety reasons. I don't know how many babies go missing from UK, because we use this in the UK as well, and US hospitals, but this is what they're doing at the moment.
Is this standard practice now in UK hospitals, that a baby is effectively tagged with an active RFID chip?
It is in some hospital trusts, yes.
Wow. Without the parents, of course, being advised that their baby is being tagged with active RFID. But, of course, it's all in the interest of safety to prevent anything untoward occurring. And like you say, for the baby to be inadvertently attributed to the wrong parent.
You can see the logic in the thinking behind it, but this is just how it's slowly seeping into society. And the next slide we've got up is the back end of our age range, old age people in the United States. And I don't think they're yet doing this in the UK, but in the United States they use the same technology. It's the one just before, that's it. Yeah. It's called Roam Alert, and it notifies the care home if the elderly person has gone where they shouldn't go, or have been missing, or have wandered off. So again, you can see the logistics behind it, but this is how it's starting to come into society. So slowly tagging the youngest, tagging the oldest. And then if you put the next slide up, this suggestion was made by the Tea Party in America, that they were to tag autistic children as well with the same technology. As far as I know, this hasn't quite happened yet, but you can see where this is going. That will be autistic children, and then I guess it'll be like, do you want your own child tagged? You know, there was actually, the next slide is a Guardian article that happened less than a year ago, advertising a wristband for you to tag your child with. So commercially, you can get these. And in Australia, you can buy RFID tags to put on your child. That's lovely, thanks. And they will alert you if the child is going near a swimming pool, because they have a lot of child deaths from drowning in Australia from swimming pools. And so it sort of sets an alert off to the parent that the child's wandered near the swimming pool. I would not like to rely on this technology. If my child was anywhere near a swimming pool and it was a toddler, I'd be watching it. You know, I think we can sort of abdicate responsibility too much with this type of technology. And, you know, we should be keeping an eye on our old people. We should, you know, security should be sufficient in hospitals. We don't have to RFID tag newborn babies. Certainly don't think, I personally can't see any benefit in using this technology like that, though I can see why it's sold on its benefits for insurance purposes. It's all about that, isn't it?
Well, no, but it's also about an abdication of the rudiments of humanity. You know, it's effectively saying, you know, we're going to pass up our responsibility for parenting or for looking after the elderly, and we're going to hand it over to technology so that we can actually forget about it and just wait for the alarms to go off.
Of course, it won't be a human being that's looking at this. We were speaking earlier, and these systems, the more people that use it, the more people can't look at it. So they have to rely on computers to highlight anomalies, anomalistic RFID behaviour, I guess. So if that chip isn't behaving as it should do within its parameters, then an alarm gets flashed up. So it's just, we're going to have to, I guess, if this carrying of chips is going to become a long-term agenda, which I actually think it is, because it's coming in via the back door, via the children at schools, via the babies in hospitals, being sold as being safe. You know, what would we do without it? How would we look after our children without this RFID chip? And the next thing, obviously, the next step would be, well, you know, what if you lose it? What if you lose your 13.56 megahertz card with all your bank details on? And the next step is that the bank companies want to work with the phone companies to have it in your mobile phone. So you're basically, your phone is your wallet, and you can buy and sell stuff with that. And again, that will be 13.56 megahertz, and it will be able to be tracked by the 433 military system that's global, and also as well, it's got its own tracking system because it has a GPS and also is triangulated by telephone masts. So you're sort of scuppered if you want to use your bank card, really. I mean, as I say, as far as I know, it's not being used for that, but it can be used for that.
Well, it may not be used yet, but it certainly will be. And here's another slide that you sent me through. This is from the Daily Mail. It looks like it was Friday, June the 13th, so just over 10 days or so ago. Wristbands developed by Barclays to allow users to purchase a coffee or train ticket with a swish of an arm. I mean, it sounds as though basically you could be walking along and buying a whole bunch of stuff that you had no real desire to buy or knowledge that you were buying if the unscrupulous get hold of this.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it isn't a secure form of payment at all. It can be hacked, you know, it can be skim read. There was an instance recently in the past week where a lady in China had bought a mobile phone and she'd switched the NFC, which is near field communication, which is the 13.56 megahertz. She'd inadvertently had that switched on when she got given the phone, and her phone started reading other people's bank cards around her. So not only was it capable of transmitting 13.56, it was also reading other people's phones or cards, and she had up to 10 transactions on her phone of other people's financial details. She took it to the local paper there in China, and they did a test on it, and it turned out it was absolutely right. So these things can go wrong quite easily. Well,
it's the same kind of technology. I mean, 20 years ago, I actually left my car at an airport. I think I was in Orly Airport in Paris. And when I got back, there was no sign of any break-in, but the hi-fi, the CD player, etc., had all been stripped out of the car. And that was because the perpetrators were hanging around the airport parking lots and recording the electronic signature of the keys as you lock the vehicles. And of course, then they could go back to the vehicle, open the vehicle, because they had effectively created a facsimile of the frequency that opened the car. And we're talking really, you know, 20 years on, you know, the technology is used by those developing it for the purpose that it was designed for, which is not necessarily benign anyway, and of course by those who have learned how to use it for other means.
That's right. I don't think it's difficult to go out and buy these products. I mean, I get an awful lot through in my feeds, and a lot of it is companies selling these things. You can pick up 13.56 megahertz readers and 433 readers quite easily. So really the potential there to track children that are carrying this is quite high. And I think it's quite dangerous. I'd have said there are safeguarding measures there, definitely. And also, sort of going back to this abdicating responsibility and using technology to replace our human instincts, our senses and our common sense is sort of too reliant on this sort of technology. Just going back to the biometrics, there was an article on Yahoo News, I think about a year ago, where they were building sensors into laptops to check the child's facial expression, and the teacher could then analyse whether or not he'd given an adequate lesson based on how many times the child had smiled, looked at him, looked somewhere else, talked to their friends. I just think, like, if you need that aid as a teacher, you shouldn't be teaching. It's just technology gone mad. But it's interesting to keep an eye on the BET exhibition, which happens in January every year, which is the British Educational Technology something that happens in London. So I keep my eye on that to see what technology is being supplied to schools. But there's also a good article in Wired that came out about class 1984, sort of saying about the CCTVs that are used in schools and the biometrics and RFID, and now they're wanting to live stream images off schools to parents. And it's just madness. These poor kids have got no privacy whatsoever, but we need to take heed because that's what's coming down the line for us.
Well, it is.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think, and you know, we're going to be developing this theme, obviously, with you know, that wonderful person that you introduced me to, who I'm not going to mention just yet. And then obviously we'll be talking to Steve again in hopefully in a couple of weeks or so. And what we are seeing is literally the subjugation of humanity to silicon, the total subjugation, because as we've alluded to, basically no human has the wherewithal or even probably the desire to monitor all this data. So it's going to be going into mainframes. And yeah, I mean, also, I mean, I've had a couple of experiences this week with call centers, and I think I was sharing one with you in a conversation a couple of days ago. And, you know, when I was training recruiters 30 odd years ago in the oilfield services industry, you know, one of the prerequisites that I was asking the recruiters to focus on was recruiting people who were capable of independent thought. I mean, this is before the days of the internet. I mean, it's even before the days of mobile phones, believe it or not. I know that perhaps many people watching this can't believe that actually, you know, there is still a few generations alive that went through a significant chunk of their lives without access to mobile technology. So in the mid-1980s, we needed people who were going to be able to operate completely autonomously and independently without any possibility of any external input. Today, if you display those kind of capacity or those kind of traits of independence, then you're almost unemployable, because the vast majority of employees in the corporatocracy today are literally restricted by whatever it is that the silicon, the algorithm in the silicon, the Venn diagram that perhaps even the silicon has developed for itself, is forcing the person to follow. And they have no capacity whatsoever to apply any aspect of common sense.
It's almost like we're dumbing ourselves down as a species, isn't it? And I think...
well, we may not be dumbing ourselves down, but something is dumbing us down, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's
true. And we're willingly participating in the process.
Well, even more so, because we do have the Internet of Things literally just around the corner. And in actual fact, the 8 UK high schools are piloting the Internet of Things, this sort of ubiquitous, where we can see everything that we all do and look at the objects sort of digitally that we're interacting with. So 8 schools are running with this. I think we had a slide on a previous show with a view to sort of running it out to more schools in September. But this is all part of the SMART agenda, and certainly any interview that you can find with Mike Mitchum on, listen to, I would recommend. He knows a lot more about this topic than me, but having looked at it from a school point of view, they're wanting to, the government is in the process of making our cities smart. So we have Wi-Fi coming out of lampposts, we have smart motorways. I was driving to my parents' house on the M1, and the area near Leeds is on a 50 mile an hour. And it said installing smart motorways. I was like, what's that? And apparently smart motorways have sensors built every 100 meters that will see what lanes are busy. So at certain points in time, if at peak traffic, they can start to open up the hard shoulder, or I don't know, sort of manipulate the traffic flow, which actually you think makes sense, but it's another form of tracking. It's another form of not being able to travel anonymously. We've already got that with ANPR and CCTV. And I also read another article saying that they wanted to put sensors into bridges and road surfaces so they could see when they needed repairing. How did we ever manage without RFID chips and smart motorways and bridges that needed repairing? But you know, it's here, and it is coming in, and it's silent. And this is the same thing with the CCTV cameras. We're all aware of CCTV. We get in this country surveilled by consent. Whether you like it or not, you've consented to it. What's happening in the States, and I haven't seen any evidence of it happening over here yet, is that facial recognition programs are being run behind the CCTV images to government databases of drivers or police databases. In actual fact, the first conviction happened, I think, last July, of somebody who was caught on CCTV, had their face run through a facial recognition system, and it pulled him up and he got convicted on that basis. But the quality of the photograph for it to be viable for CCTV is only 20 pixels in between the eyes. So it's a very low resolution photograph. It does depend on whether your face is full on to the camera or not, because it has problems if you're at the side. But again, there are algorithms that can determine what you would look like if you were head on. And the same with iris retina sort of screening and biometrics. In that sense, they can only used to be able to do it sort of with an eye full on, but now they can actually do it from just about up to 20 feet. One of the big universities in the States has developed an algorithm that will sort of adjust the eye and tell the biometric reader what it is that they're looking at. But the BioCatch article, which I think you've got there a slide of, Ian, with the facial recognition on.
Yep, there we go.
This is an Israeli company that offers its services to banks and high-end customers to capture people's biometrics without them knowing about it, so they can determine whether somebody's acting suspiciously. So these are the sort of points it looks at, but the company's offering sort of covert biometrics.
So once again, this is pre-crime, isn't it? It's actually... I mean, obviously, we know that the people on border controls at airports, they're taught to look for any unusual sort of body language. And I mean, this is basically, again, automation of looking at the facial expression and instantaneously deciding whether or not it likes to look on your face or not.
But I think this is going to come through with the RFID and the 13.56. I mean, if you've got a contactless card, anybody can use it. I don't have to be the human that's using the card. I could actually give it to my child and let it go to the shop and spend my money. So inherently, that system is insecure. It's less secure than the chip and pin. So what's happening in France at the moment is a big bank system over there. They're trialing biometrics. So you have the card and you have the person. So you're biometrically confirming that you're the human with that card and that's using it.
Well, and in today's Pippa, in today's Daily Mail, and I literally just flicked this a few minutes before we came on air, and here it is: voice ID could spell the end of bank passwords. So, it's the combination of your wristband, your biometrics, which would include voice ID. So I guess they think that by covering all bases, they can persuade the average Joe that it's secure and it's safe, because it's not just one thing. You've got to have all three. But of course, what it's doing is it's actually bringing more and more personal data into the mainframe.
Absolutely, and this is where hopefully our next guest will take it, because the data mapping and profiling that can be done even now is absolutely immense. There can be there are systems that can highlight families that possibly need care from social workers, problem children. It's frightening how much data we leave behind with us, where we've gone, what we've bought. I don't have any loyalty cards. That's my business. I don't want to give any shopping company what I buy and sell, because they're not bound to keep hold of that data, and it may go somewhere else, and then this all goes to build a bigger picture of me. And so going back to the biometrics and verifying the chip, because I can think this is what's going to come with these contactless cards. And then the next step after that is completely what Greg is talking about, because what happens if you lose your card? What's going to happen then? Wouldn't it be safer just to slip it under the skin? Because literally on that wristband, you're millimetres away from it being on the other side of your skin. And people are chipped. I mean, people have been voluntarily chipped in the United States and in South America. And this is exactly what they use their hands for. They use it to unlock their car. They use it for bank account details. And they are their identity. There's a horrendous video on YouTube where I think there's a lady on there who used to work for DARPA. and she was sort of saying your fingers will be our antennae, and it is about transhumanism when you sort of take it further, you know, a couple more steps down the line. But the ability to switch you off as a human being would be immense. You know, if you did something and didn't fit the algorithm that, as a system you were in, and it flagged you up as a potential anomaly, people can disable your cards and switch you off, you know. And I think this is what it's going with the lack of cash. I mean, I saw an article saying there was one high street somewhere that had gone cashless, and on the 6th of July you can't use cash on London buses anymore. You have to use your Oyster card or whatever system is there, but you can't actually jump on a bus and take some cash out and pay for a ticket anymore. That stops on the 6th of July.
Yeah, well, we can see where it's heading, and you know, tragically, people are effectively giving this social license by their absolute abject lack of opposition. And as we have demonstrated in our discussions with yourself, Pippa, you know, you have been primarily a lone campaigner in trying to slow down the agenda of biometrics in schools. You certainly managed to at least put a temporary block on RFID in schools. But so it's amazing, you know, what one person who is focused on this can do. Imagine what it would be if it was an entire community. And this is really what we need to be encouraging people to look at, because we talk about smart motorways. We can see where this is going. Already there is discussion in some states in the US about literally charging people per mile that they travel. Well, of course, we're already charged per mile because that's the tax in the fuel. But they are literally looking at a specific tax per mile, thereby effectively restricting the distance that the less wealthy can travel, even more than they do at the moment through their inability to actually pay for the fuel costs. And the next stage, of course, is literally to be able to say, well, you know what, you don't have the necessary, whatever it is, amount of money in your bank, or you know, your social record or social standing. So there will be areas that you are literally blocked from going to. Maybe you're not allowed in the cities, and like you say, the ultimate of this is you know, you don't answer the questions correctly when you call a call center, and the person at the end of the phone reaches the final question, and it says, if the person has not met this criteria, now press this button to switch off their life force.
Yeah, this is the danger, isn't it? You don't know what's in the chip that could potentially be in your body, pardon me, or in your card. Yeah, I'm sure there's an off switch for cars, and I'm sure there's an off switch for cards, and that there are bank cards. You know, they become invalid, don't they? So, yeah. This is control, completely control, and the scary thing is about it that it's silent. It's frequency. We can't see it. So essentially, we still see the same CCTV, but there's different programs running on in the background. We still see the same roads and motorways. We see them with new tarmac on. Nothing changes, except that there are sensors in them. Because this technology is silent and invisible, and could interact with the cars that we carry, but we don't see that, then it's easy to not know it's happening. I mean, I only really knew about the RFID because I was looking at the fact my kids nearly got fingerprinted when they were 6 and 7, and I looked to the States and they were using RFID chips there. So I've been aware of RFID in schools and in society really since way back in 2005-06. So But if you're sort of new to this, you would only get that information, I guess, from myself or Mike Mitchum or somebody else talking about the topic, because essentially, visually and how we act in society, nothing has changed. No,
and Pippa, you know, it is absolutely thanks to the likes of yourself, to Mike, of course, who picked up on the smart meter agenda just, I think, about 3 years ago, to Greg Nikolettos, and to our mystery guest, who will be coming on in a few weeks, who will be taking this to a whole new level. Now, this is Humanity versus Insanity. This program was recorded on Monday, 23rd of June, 2014. Tragically, there are some of us who can see where this agenda is heading, but individually, we're not powerless to stop it. But we can achieve so much more when more people get involved, when more people take an interest in what is unfolding, in terms of the transhumanist agenda. In other words, removing the last vestiges of humanity from society, from the human race. If you work in a call centre, you already have effectively foregone much of your humanity because you have very little capacity for independent thought. You have to follow a script. You have no capacity for individual decision making. You cannot apply common sense. You have to follow the algorithm. This is humanity versus insanity. In a decade, I hope we still have humanity. See you in 45 minutes with Fracking Nightmare.